Thanks everybody for being here this morning. I'm joined with the Minister for Police, the Police Commissioner, Peter McKenna, the Assistant Commissioner for New South Wales Police, and David Ossip from the Jewish Board of Deputies. We're all here to speak about what were undeniably horrifying scenes in Sydney's east this morning. These are horrifying anti-Semitic attacks. They're violent. I think they've shocked the people of New South Wales and Australia. And honestly, I never thought I would see this kind of naked racism and anti-Semitism repeating itself on the streets of Sydney in such an organised, horrifying manner. It is truly disgusting and against all of the ethos, all of the community sentiment about what living in Australia is all about. And I know that these shameful, violent, appalling behaviour is condemned by the vast, vast majority of people that live in this state and live in this country. I'd also like to acknowledge that the attack this morning on the home and the property in Sydney's east, I think it's reasonable for me to talk about this because it is in the media. That property was once owned by Alex Rivchin, who's the co-CEO of the Executive Council of Australian Jewry. Now, while police can't categorically at this early stage of the investigation say that the attack and the residents are linked, clearly it would be a massive coincidence if they were not linked. And it's very important to say at this early stage of the inquiry that this is an active line of police investigation, that this was in fact a targeted attack. I also want to make the point that I personally spoke to Alex this morning, and so did Peter. And I spoke to him on the phone. Now, I think it's fair to say Alex is obviously concerned, but I was struck by how resilient and strong and absolutely fortified in his commitment to the cause that he's been associated with, to his leadership position on the Australian Council of Jewry in Australia, and his resoluteness. I found it truly remarkable and a true insight into his character, that he is not taking a backward step under any circumstances and he will not be cowed. It was a fantastic example of resilience, and everybody's thinking about Alex and his family at the moment. I also want to make it clear that police are directing a huge amount of resources at this operation. Strike Force Pearl has 20 detectives working on anti-Semitic violent attacks in our community full time. They are making headway in their inquiries. Just yesterday they executed their third arrest in relation to property damage offences in New South Wales in November of last year. These attacks in New South Wales will not be tolerated, and those who are perpetrating these attacks will be met with the full force of the law. And as we speak, New South Wales Police are hunting down these absolutely barbaric acts and these terrible incidents that have been conducted by people in our community that have hate in their heart. We will increase the law. We will put resources into fighting this crime. We will make sure that the community response to this from the vast majority is overwhelmingly against this kind of appalling behaviour. But the truth of the matter is that incidents of anti-Semitism, violent behaviour, are increasing in our community. And collectively, as a community, as a society, we have to stand together to condemn it unambiguously and send a clear message to these animals that these actions will not be tolerated. They'll be arrested for their activities, for their hate crimes, and this community won't stand for it. And I'm going to pass over to the Police Commissioner.
Thank you, Premier. As the Premier has just mentioned, police were called to a premises in Dover Heights just before 4 a.m. this morning, where a home and 4 vehicles had been maliciously damaged. 2 vehicles were set on fire. What I say about that is criminal behaviour conducted by criminals, and you can expect to be tracked down. We will continue to investigate this until they are found and put before the courts. This is another event in Sydney's history, unfortunately, but I'm pleased to say we already have members, people that have been charged for other malicious damage, graffiti, hate crime in Sydney are before the courts. So the message is you will get caught. It's just a matter of time. So you can expect police to knock on your door look over your shoulder. If you are responsible or you know someone responsible, then you need to call the police and let us know, because we'll come looking. No matter how long it takes us, we'll keep looking. We have very strong leads of inquiry on most of these matters that have been reported to police, and we will find the perpetrators. I have with me here this morning Assistant Commissioner Peter McKenna, who is the Region Commander for Central Metropolitan Region that takes in the city and out to the east and down to the southeast, and he can elaborate more on the specifics that have occurred in his area. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. As the Premier said, 20 detectives on Strike Force Pearl. 20 detectives is a significant strike force. They are going back months and months of looking at all of these offences that have been committed, and just this week has shown that we don't give up. We don't just stop after a week in these lines of inquiries. We take them on till we get to the results, and we will continue to do so. Overarching Strike Force Pearl is Operation Shelter. Operation Shelter has now been running since October 8, 2023. Since the inception of Operation Shelter up until today, 179 people have been arrested and charged for over 452 offences. We will not give up. We will follow every lead. We say that this is not acceptable. It's not acceptable in Sydney. It's not acceptable in Australia. We will have every detective that we need, every resource we need to get to the bottom of these crimes. There is a community at the moment who feels under threat. That's not acceptable. Our job in New South Wales Police is not only to keep people safe, but to make them feel safe. We will pivot and surge whatever resources we need to make that happen. I can tell you now, those people out there who are thinking about being involved in this sort of behaviour, we might not come knocking tomorrow, it might not be the next day, but we will come knocking, you will be arrested and you will be charged. So think twice about it. There are people out there who will know something about these crimes. There are people out there who will know who is committing these crimes. We urge you to come forward and call Crime Stoppers. We need the community to work with us. We need this to stop. There are issues happening overseas that are now playing out on the streets of Sydney and have been for some time, and it is not acceptable. We cannot have people who don't feel safe in Sydney, Australia. Our detectives are working tirelessly 24/7. We also have our proactive arm of policing under Shelter working 24/7. We have multiple cars every day doing over 300 taskings in these areas. If we have to increase resources, we will increase resources. If we have to pivot and surge our resources to other areas, we will do that. If we need other areas of the police force to come and join us, they will come and join us. So don't think people are getting away with this, because I can tell you now, this is our top priority as we speak right now when you have a community that feels under siege. It's not acceptable, and we will throw everything at it. I might pass now to the Police Minister to address you.
He's a hard act to follow, isn't he? Look, can I also just say that these heinous attacks that we have seen on our streets in Sydney overnight are unprecedented and they are unacceptable, and as has just been said, we will hunt you down, we will find you and we will lock you up. What we are seeing on our streets is totally un-Australian, and the New South Wales Police message to the community, the Jewish community in the eastern suburbs and in New South Wales is, we are with you, we support you, and we will keep you safe. As you have just heard, the New South Wales Police will throw every resource at this. We are determined to get this behaviour, these attacks, these un-Australian behaviours off our streets, and to make sure that the people in our community feel safe. The New South Wales Police stand with you every step of the way. They are out there, as has just been said, on the streets, patrolling the streets, ensuring the people, particularly in and around our synagogues and our major structures, that they are there, they are looking at you with both eyes. And if you do the wrong thing, you can expect to have the full force of the law, and we will put you behind bars. This is absolutely intolerable. And the community has every reason to stand with us and provide information to us so that we can make sure that we find who these people are and that they can get the full force of the law. I might hand you over to David Ossip from the Jewish Board of Deputies.
Well, thank you so much, Minister. Thank you, Premier. Thank you to the Commissioner and Assistant Commissioner for being here today and for standing in solidarity and support with the Jewish community. All Australians should be sickened, they should be disturbed, and they should be outraged at yet another anti-Semitic hate crime, this time which occurred in Dover Heights. These are scenes we should never see here in Sydney or in Australia. Cars being blown up, houses being defaced, places of worship being targeted. This isn't the Australian way. No Australian should have to go to bed filled with apprehension about hate crimes being perpetrated overnight. No Australian should be concerned with the well-being of their property or their vehicles overnight. There is no room for hate in our community. And it's time to call this out for what it is. This is a campaign of domestic terrorism which is targeted at the Jewish community, which is intended to intimidate, harass and menace our community. And to these hate-filled culprits, these cowards who lurk at night behind masks, who want to intimidate and menace the Jewish community, who want us to be silent, our message is you will not succeed. The Jewish community is resilient, the Jewish community is proud, the Jewish community is unbowed, and together with all Australians we will stand up to you and you will not succeed.
Thanks, David, and we're all happy to take questions.
Premier Minns, I think everyone understands that NSW isn't the GDR, NSW police aren't Stasi. Police can't police every road, every home in the state.
Yeah.
But there's been 4 anti-Semitic attacks now in 7 days. We're in the middle of an anti-Semitism crisis in the state and Australia. What was your government going to do? What's the police going to do to ensure we're not here on Monday after another Jewish suburb surrounding lights and cars?
Yeah, look, I mean, I cannot stand in front of you and promise that it's the end of anti-Semitic hate crimes in New South Wales. I can't do that. What I can promise is a full and comprehensive police response to any crime that's taking place in New South Wales, the continuation of Operation Shelter for major centres of Jewish life in the state, and as the government of New South Wales, leading in an unambiguous way the community's response to these acts of hate. I mean, I spoke to my wife this morning when we heard about this attack on the radio. She said to me, I feel sick in the stomach. This is the opposite of the kind of community and country that we want to live in. So I want to make a couple of things clear. Firstly, the resourcing for police will be there. The Wakely investigation that took place over the last 12 months was comprehensive, and it did result in many, many arrests. Some of those arrests occurred months after the criminal activities took place. So no one should rest easy if you're responsible for these acts, and no one should believe that New South Wales police aren't meeting this threat. It's a legitimate threat. It's one that we are acknowledging and not sweeping under the carpet or trying to delegitimise or suggesting that it's not as acute as it is in the community, but it will be met with a full and comprehensive police response. When Parliament resumes in February, the government will also be pursuing changes to the law. Now, some of that will have to do with protecting religious places of worship, in particular the Great Synagogue in the middle of Sydney CBD. We'll also be pursuing changes to hate law and hate speech in the state. The reason for those changes in hate law and hate speech is because I don't think that a firebombing in Sydney's East is where this begins. I think it begins with individuals in our community promoting, tolerating and highlighting hatred of Jewish people in their communities. And as a result of that, lighting a fire that eventually sees a synagogue being burnt down, a car being vandalised, a Jewish community leader's house potentially being targeted. That's where it ends, but it begins somewhere else. So I want to make it clear we've got a comprehensive response to this. We are not being lighthearted about it. We are not trying to dismiss it as a threat or an attack, but I cannot promise that it's the end of it because there are very bad people in our community that need to be confronted. Yes, sir.
Is there any suggestion that it could be something more sinister at play, like attempted murder or something like that, given the personalities involved?
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't think anything's going to be ruled out, but police have obviously at the beginning of their inquiries and their investigations, and that'll take some time, but they'll update the community and the media as those inquiries take place.
Premier, on that point again, noting the arrest the police made, that the efforts your government has done. There's no comparable city in the world, whether it be in Australia or Western democracies, who's seeing the same prevalence of anti-Semitic attacks as Sydney is seeing. What do you think are the reasons behind that? Why is Sydney particularly seeing so many anti-Semitic attacks almost daily, when it's almost weekly?
Look, Alex, I can't speak to that. I mean, other than to say that there's some terrible actors in the community and that they're going to commit hateful acts because they've got hate in their hearts or they're driven by an ideology that seems to impel them or push them towards attacking someone that they've never met before, that they don't know, simply because of their faith, simply because of their religion. I just want to make it clear that that's antithetical to everything that Australia represents and that it will not be tolerated. Now, I want to make it clear that this is a major concern. There is a rise in anti-Semitic attacks and hate crime in New South Wales. It'll be met with the full force of the law, and civic society needs to stand up. We can't just put this all on the shoulders of New South Wales Police, all on the shoulders of the prosecutors at the DPP. We as a society have to come together and unambiguously say that anti-Semitism, racism will never be tolerated in New South Wales. It is not the kind of country or city or state that we want to live in.
There were hopes that yesterday's ceasefire deal would dial down tensions. Does today's attack suggest otherwise?
Well, I mean, we can't rely on that because what you'll see inevitably as a result of these hate crimes is people distorting whatever happens overseas. And unfortunately, whether it's in that part of the world or somewhere else in the world, events that take place in other countries, in other parts of the world, if they're hostile events, if they're wars, they can't be replicated here in New South Wales on Sydney streets. I mean, many people came to this city and this country specifically to avoid this kind of confrontation, this kind of hatred. And we are not going to see it imported into the streets of New South Wales. It's one of the reasons why we have far stricter and far tougher hate speech laws in Australia than they do in the United States. And I don't make any apologies for that. The reason we do is because we want to protect what can be a very fragile community that we've built in Australia, the multicultural community of 2025, and that's not up for debate, and it's not up for a change.
Maybe one for yourself, Commissioner. I mean, stylistically, there's a lot of similarities between all of these attacks. Has there been an established link between them yet? Are we working?
It might leave Peter or the Commissioner.
Certainly, we've got an open mind to whether any of these matters are linked. That's why Strike Force Pearl has been established, to bring all these investigations under the one roof with the one team, as has been said, 20 detectives from Counter-Terrorism Command, State Crime Command, and resources from this region. They've all come together to work collectively on this and keeping a very open mind about anything that might indicate that they're linked or that there's perpetrators here or elsewhere.
But just to clarify, there's no evidence that one suggests they are linked?
Other than the way that the crimes have been perpetrated, but at this stage, as I said, as it's a very much a live investigation, nothing to suggest that there's linkages, but equally, I'm not going to discount it.
Commissioner, is this going to be looked at as an act of terror, this incident?
Certainly, if it needs to be, if we need to seek additional powers as the investigation unfolds, that if that's necessary, then we'll consider it. But at this point in time, it is not part of the consideration, and it is being investigated for what it is, and that is malicious damage, very seriously, by the use of fire, which is very risky, very dangerous, and has its own penalties with high consequence.
Why is it considering it at this stage?
On the Premier's point of these acts didn't start. There's a different genesis to them than what just happened this morning. Yesterday, Jewish leaders and I think federal opposition called for state premiers, state police to clamp down on weekly protests. They're claiming or alleging that those protests heighten the tensions within the community. There's anti-Semitic words, phrases in them. Would you look or would you ask the Premier to explore the possibility of putting a block on those weekly protests?
I mean, it's a decision for, it's a policy decision because, as I've said many, many times, we police the laws of the day, and certainly public assembly is free speech is permitted in Australia, and we work with communities, no matter which community, on making sure that they're conducted lawfully. The important point is that they're conducted within boundaries, and if they're outside of that law, outside of those, we will take action.
I can speak to that too. I mean, I think it's important to note that yes, there's been almost weekly protests in the middle of Sydney in relation to the events in the Middle East, going back over a year. But and protesting is lawful in Australia. In fact, there's case law from the High Court that indicates that that's the law of the land. That doesn't mean over the last year the New South Wales government hasn't actively prosecuted, the New South Wales police haven't prosecuted individuals that have waved terrorist flags. It doesn't mean that we've allowed hate speech in the community, and it doesn't mean that where we've seen a gap in the law we haven't been prepared to take action and change that law. The most specific and recent example I can give you is the protection of religious institutions. And the reason we made that change, notwithstanding the implied freedom of communication and protest in Australia, the reason we changed that law is that there's an implied freedom to express your religion as well and go to the local synagogue or the local church free from vilification or fear or protest. Now, all of those changes that we've pursued, changes to hate speech laws, changes to protests out the front of religious institutions, targeting of individuals that have been spraying around terrorist flags, have been met with opposition, sometimes from within my own party, but we have been resolute about the need to protect the community and in particular community cohesion.
Premier, where does it cross the line from being a racial attack to a terrorist attack? Where does that line get crossed?
Look, a couple of things. Firstly, the terrorism designation is a technical designation that New South Wales Police will elect to pursue, and it unlocks specific powers that they need to conduct the investigation. Now, if New South Wales Police, if the Police Commissioner, Peter McKenna, says we don't need that right now, we've got 20 full-time detectives. Some of those detectives are from the Counter-Terrorism Command. We've got the resources we need and the power we need to execute our investigation, then they won't press that terrorism designation. However, you've just heard from the Police Commissioner that if they believe it crosses that threshold, that they need the extra powers in order to keep the community safe, I don't hesitate, they'll pursue it, and they'll have the full backing of the New South Wales government.
What's your opinion on it, though? Do you think?
Just one comment, possible. Noting the changes you alluded to at the start, but to promote the legislation around protecting synagogues, which I'm assuming will come from the buildings. This week, Australia's envoy to combat anti-Semitism has, across a couple of days, called on the PM to convene the National Cabinet. Given the national scale of this crisis, the attacks we're seeing in Sydney, given another attack overnight, do you think now the Prime Minister should call the National Cabinet so all the premiers, all the territory leaders are on the same page on this issue?
Well, look, I'd be open to that. My understanding is the Prime Minister had a meeting with state and territory leaders about a week ago. That's important. We're in constant dialogue at the political level, the leader level. I think probably most importantly, New South Wales Police and the AFP, as well as intelligence and security agencies, are constantly talking about threats to the community. And that's not just in the recent surge in anti-Semitic attacks. That's been the case for a long period of time. I mean, my responsibility is to ensure that we are communicating with the Commonwealth to share intelligence, to share information. My second responsibility is to make sure that the public messaging from the New South Wales government is unambiguous, and that is anti-Semitic attacks will not be tolerated in New South Wales, and we'll do everything we possibly can to confront it, and those that perpetrate it, to arrest them.
Premier, there seems to be, from the outside, a sort of professional element to this. I mean, this carbon means that they've gone away, the police have been able to legally shut it down. Is that sort of lead the police are pursuing at the moment, or is that something that might be explored with organised crimes and attacks?
Yeah, look, I don't think anything's being ruled out. I'm not sure the police want to speculate about ongoing investigations other than to say to the public that those inquiries are taking place right now.
You haven't said organised work, Premier. Has there been anything that has...
Sorry, what was that?
You did say organised work, you were speaking earlier. Has there been any evidence of that yet?
I think the Commissioner was asked that, but Peter, did you want to speak to it?
Look, very careful not to talk about ongoing operations, but can say we are following a number of leads for various investigations under Strikeforce Pearl. I wouldn't go any further than that at this point in time, so I don't want to compromise any further investigations.
Could I just ask you a question? Obviously, it appears like it's an attack on a high-profile Jewish leader. Are you concerned for your own well-being and safety after that?
It goes without saying that the Jewish community and Jewish communal leaders are working closely with law enforcement to make sure that the community as a whole and individuals within the community are secured.
Premier, we put in our report on this incident this morning, a Jewish family in Dover Heights who explained to our journalists at the scene that they were having conversations at the dinner table about whether they should move to Israel because they feel so unsafe in the city. And I know that's a conversation that isn't exclusive to that one family. How upsetting is that for you as the Premier that Australian Jews, city-siders, are now thinking of relocating because of what's been happening over the last couple of months?
Yeah, I mean, that's a devastating anecdote. I don't doubt it for a second, and that's obviously something that I'm very, very concerned about. We want the Jewish community in New South Wales that have contributed so much to the welfare and the cohesion and the prosperity of our state to feel comfortable in their own homes, in the country of their home, the place where they're raising their families, where their parents have moved to in some cases. It should be remembered that per capita, Australia is the second largest home of Holocaust survivors in the world. And the reason such large numbers came to Australia to call home was because they believed that they would be free of this kind of anti-Semitic persecution. So it is devastating to hear stories like that. I don't doubt their providence for a second. I want the community to know that we're throwing all of our resources at it, firstly. And secondly, importantly, I want them to know that the vast, vast majority of civil society in Australia stands with them in solidarity and against this kind of barbaric, animalistic act that's been perpetuated against the Jewish community in New South Wales.
Premier, just on that, we were out there this morning and overwhelmingly from residents, they were saying they're sick of words from the government and not action. What do you say to that?
Look, arrests are going to take time. Obviously, police need to collect evidence. These are acts that are being perpetrated by members of the community with hate in their heart, and over time that inquiry and that investigation will lead to arrests. I'd love for that to have happened yesterday, the day before this event even took place, but it's not possible to do that. What I can promise them is that the full resources of the New South Wales Government and New South Wales Police are being deployed in relation to this investigation, and that arrests have already been made in relation to some high-profile attacks on Jewish businesses and the Jewish community. Now, for some that's going to be cold comfort, and I can completely understand that in the circumstances. But no one is sweeping this under the carpet or trying to minimise it or suggest that it's not a serious, serious threat to community cohesion and the safety and welfare of the Jewish community of this state.
Premier, just if you mind asking about a different topic, if that's okay.
Sure.
Just about psychiatry patients. Are you considering moving those public psychiatry patients into the private sector?
We've got a triage plan that's been put in place in the event that we do have the high number of resignations from psychiatrists in the state. Now, some of that involves using the private hospital network. Some of it involves a central agency that's going to look very closely at where public health is at a critical level across our local health districts in New South Wales. I've been briefed on that. So is the Minister for Health. So is the Minister for Mental Health. It's regrettable that we have to stand up those massive changes, but clearly we can't have a situation where, say, half the public psychiatrists in New South Wales resign en masse. We need to have contingencies in place. Some of those contingencies will involve the use of the private sector.
And does the private sector have the capability or the capacity to look after all those patients?
Yeah, in some cases they do, because we need to have a registered psychiatrist for some of the critical interventions when it comes to mental health in the state.
Premier, just on your allusion to strengthening Section 90 when Parliament returns,
Yeah.
would that mean that, or would you explore putting into the legislation, currently it's inciting violence, but are you alluding that you might look at including incitement to hatred
Yeah.
in the provision?
Yeah, that's already in the Act, but it needs to be pursued in New South Wales by civil means rather than criminal means. And what that ends up, for example, the practical use of that in recent times, although it's not exclusively used by members of the Jewish community, but it means that an individual needs to effectively bring a private prosecution to prove vilification. Now that exposes the individual. It means that they have to stand up and pursue that change rather than public authority saying, well, we're looking at this, we believe this is an affront and attack on community cohesion and something needs to change. So that's an area of the law that we're looking at changing when Parliament reviews.
Reports from maybe yesterday suggested that Ravi unions were preparing a counter-offer to make to your government. Have you received that offer? And if so,
No, I haven't received it. I haven't received the offer. I haven't received the details of the offer. I don't know what it is. It's very late in the day to receive a counter-offer from rail unions. We're going to pursue our 424 application regardless. I mean, we've been down this road before with constant negotiations, but I want to make it clear that if the 424 application from the government is upheld by the Fair Work Commission, then we do enter a period of negotiations with the union. The key difference would be those negotiations would take place without a noose around the public, and it can take place without everybody's trains and trips and transport being heavily delayed or cancelled as a result. So a far better environment in which to look at a counter-offer, but I haven't had one passed to me.
Premier, in Dover Heights, the Jewish community there were praising the police and the work they have done to find these attackers, but they are concerned that once it gets to the court system that judges won't be taking it as seriously and they'll get off with minor penalties. What are you going to do to ensure that the penalties imposed by the courts are severe enough to stop this behaviour?
Look, penalties in place for hate crimes, for malicious damage, for changes to the law in relation to vilification, particularly violence, there's some significant penalties that are in place for those that pursue those criminal acts. I'm open to changing the law if we believe that having gone through the process of establishing a task force, putting 20 detectives on it, putting millions of dollars of public funds into protecting the Jewish community, if it ends up getting in front of a magistrate or a judge and effectively it's a slap on the wrist and something needs to change. But I just need to say at the moment we've got to get these offenders in front of the courts. We're still at the arrest stage, and if in the end the law needs to change, of course I'll pursue that. And I think my track record over the last 12 months and the government's track record over the last 2 years is precisely to that point. When we've seen a deficiency in the law, when we've seen community cohesion being upset, or we've seen a sector of our community being vilified, we have taken action and we're prepared to take action, and we'll do it again.
And just quickly back on trains, if that's all right. Do you
Sure.
have an update on what the situation is like today?
It's over 90% on time running, which is good news, and look, we want to continue that. If we don't have industrial disputes on the railways, then we can get above 9 out of 10 trains getting to their destination on time, and that means that the millions of people that need public transport to get to and from work can do it without being delayed.
What's your opinion on that Fair Work Commission's interim ban? Are you happy with it?
Look, we welcome it, but it's all ahead of us. We've got to present a strong case on Wednesday, and when we're in the hands of the Fair Work Commission. But clearly the disruption to New South Wales is so massive that it can't continue. And just want to point out that on Wednesday, nearly 2,000 trains were cancelled, destroying the plans of the millions of people that live in Sydney. On Thursday, 1,000 trains were cancelled, but 40% of passengers elected not to use public transport. So people voted with their feet and didn't turn up for work or work from home or changed or cancelled their plans. If you replicate that over months and months and months of industrial action, the damage to the New South Wales economy is massive. And I think part of the point we'll make in the Fair Work Commission is it's not possible for us to calculate the full impact, the full economic impact, other than to say it will touch every business in Sydney and nearly every household in Sydney.
On that note, is there a decision or potential decision in the works for whether commuters will be refunded?
I don't have anything to say about that just yet. We'll make a decision once Fair Work makes its decision on Wednesday.
And if that decision goes against you, do you have a plan B?
We always have a plan B. Okay, thanks everybody.